PIX on Politics, time now for our PIX panel, joined as always by PIX 11 political reporter Ayana and this week Ben Max from the Gotham Gazette. Good to have both of you here. So let's get into this. Big council primary elections this past week, right? Every seat was up for grabs. The victory of Yusef Salaam was really the headline, one of the Central Park 5 in the 9th District, Ayana. So talk a little bit about this race, because a lot of people were looking at the race really between Yusef and Inez Dickens.
Yeah, well, Dan, we covered Yusef Salaam's race from the very beginning. In fact, he gave his first interview about his campaign to PIX 11. And back at that time, it was clear when he walks down the streets of Harlem that people know who Yusef Salaam is. They certainly resonate with his story. But there was a real question as to whether or not he would be able to launch and carry out a successful campaign, and we certainly saw that. And I will mention Inez Dickens, a state assembly member. She has been a fixture of Harlem politics for decades, so this is really turning a new chapter in Harlem in terms of political leadership.
Yeah, and but overall, though, when you look at the numbers here, as expected, low for a primary, right? So I guess, Ben, when you look at this, why are people less inclined to participate in such local, hyper-local politics? City council really affecting the individuals who live in those neighborhoods.
You know, we're not going to be able to probably crack that mystery right now. There's a real problem. There's a real problem and challenge with people getting engaged in local politics and civic affairs and elections, and it's something that New York really needs to work on. And there's probably questions here about how often we're asking people to come out and vote in local elections. There's some interesting proposals out there about shifting some of the elections around, things to explore down the line. But certainly more New Yorkers need to realize the impact that the city council, the mayor, and others have on their daily lives far beyond what a lot of national politicians have.
Yeah, the mayor's been trying to do these town halls and go into people's communities, right? And then last week on Wednesday, the mayor took exception to the way that a longtime tenant housing activist actually spoke to him, comparing her to a plantation owner. Now, she told her own Henry Rossoff that he did that to avoid answering her questions about rent increases. Let me get your take, Ayana, first and foremost, on this whole exchange.
So I will say I think that this is part of, this comes down to preferences in terms of leadership style, right? So the mayor was clearly uncomfortable. It seemed like he didn't appreciate the way in which this question was asked. And the mayor has multiple ways in which he can respond. And certainly the way he responded in this case has really upset many people. And I will agree. I don't know if I necessarily heard the answer to her question in that particular exchange, although I know that there was a longer conversation that I was not listening to. But this really comes down to, look, Mayor Eric Adams, he is, outspoken. He says what's on his mind, and that's what he did in this case. And that style just isn't sitting well with some people. But it's Eric Adams sort of being true to who we've seen so far.
Yeah, and he certainly comes after the media, too, if they address him in a certain way. But, Ben, let me get you on the mayor, too, and the budget here, right? Finally reaching a budget overall. It seemed that both sides had to give as expected here, but avoiding some cuts for big things like libraries.
Yeah, there were some significant things where the city council pushed back on potential cuts in the scheme of a $107 billion budget. These weren't large numbers, and the money was there, and the council was able to push back. And I don't think the mayor really felt like he wanted to hold too firm on these things because the money is there. The fascinating thing to me is that this was a $107 billion budget. And the mayor and the city council were acting like this was a devastating situation that they were dealing with, instead of really coming together to celebrate all the ways that they're investing in New Yorkers and services. It was a really remarkable scene.
Yeah, and people were really commenting on the handshake and saying how jovial it was last year compared to this year. We're going to have to leave it there because we're tight on time. But Ayana and Ben, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.